evening. Our top story this week. In Massachusetts, the child protective industry has dramatically increased the number of kids they're snatching these days, which is an unfortunate and tragic overreaction to the case of a missing boy, which has now caused a month-long panic and media circus. It also comes out that more than one-third of Massachusetts CPS agents are not licensed in their field, and that they've been skipping out on almost 20% of the required visits to kids' homes. Massachusetts CPS agents are claiming that they're leaving in high numbers because of the state's policy of strip searching child abuse victims, as well as the boss's policy of putting cost savings over kids' interests. But the good news is that the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families Commissioner reassures everybody by saying that they haven't lost any more kids. Parents should beware, as the child protective industry now has a new set of eyes disguised to help new parents under the Affordable Care Act's home visitation program. In Arizona, the all-new child protective industry is bragging about how their team has assigned 6,550 out of 6,500 uninvestigated child abuse reports to CPS agents. The head of Arizona's new child welfare agency is criticizing the fact that the report on the state of child welfare in the state is late, and the system sucks are mad about the decision to move the agency from the State Department of Economic Security to a private standalone agency, calling the move unwise and wasteful. In Maine, parents will now be notified when their children are abused at daycare. This after they found abuse at one daycare, then let the place stay open under a conditional license without notifying any of the parents of the abuse claims. And Maine's legislatures are now crying over it and are calling for tighter oversight of all child care centers as another massive case of one bad apple spoiling the whole bunch. In Connecticut, the system sucks are all worried because they think that the state's move towards family preservation rather than taking the child and running is putting kids at risk. The federal government is demanding that the state of Nebraska repay nearly $22 million in misspent federal funds related to the botched attempt to privatize the state's child welfare system. In California, a blueprint is proposed to boost oversight of the state's child welfare system, and in Illinois, a high number of kids are still dying regardless of CPS involvement. In North Carolina, the child protective industry is changing the way they do things in light of one foster parent dead chicken and handcuff discipline program, including adding a new quality assurance coordinator. In South Carolina, the child protective industry is taking heat over their caseload reduction policy, which they claim doesn't exist despite blistering testimony to the contrary. In Texas, the state saw an exodus of nurses, prison guards, and CPS agents who left their jobs for greener pastures last year. In Virginia, overwhelmed CPS agents are being accused of improperly closing child abuse cases. And according to a new kids count report, the state of New Mexico comes in dead last for child welfare. In Ireland this week, a father of 2 kids in foster care is asking a judge to reinstate access through Skype. Former Pope Benedict apparently defrocked nearly 400 priests in a 2-year time period for child abuse. In Canada, a roundtable will examine Alberta's child welfare system after hundreds of kids have died while in their care over the last few years, with a foster mother who is on trial right now after giving different stories about how a 21-month-old kid died while in her care. Officials in Saskatchewan are claiming that they've lost more than 500 kids who are under CPS watch since 1992, and now they've lost a foster mother who was acquitted of murder in one of those cases, and they're saying that the stress of the trial contributed to her death. Manitoba is also bragging about a high number of child deaths in the province's foster care system over the last few years, which includes one man who is on trial right now for killing a 13-month-old foster kid. And Nova Scotia is denying basic information to former foster kids about their real families when they are trying to learn their family history. In Australia, it is revealed that there has been at least one report of a child being abused in foster care every week for the last 5 years. 2 Australian sisters who were abused by another foster kid who was a sex offender are suing the child protective industry for placing them all together. And in England, a little boy dies supposedly of natural causes in foster care. In entertainment news this week, Levi Johnson is denied split custody of his son, who will stay in the custody of Bristol Palin. And Brooke Mueller allows Charlie Sheen to see his kids because she wants her full child support reinstated. In Minnesota this week, a foster mother leaves a 1-year-old kid alone in a car during frigid temperatures while she was shopping at Walmart. A CPS agent from Vermont gets 18 months in jail for unlawful sexual contact after performing a physical examination on a young girl in Maine. In North Carolina, a foster parent pleads not guilty to sexually abusing his foster child. In Texas, a teenager pleads guilty to killing her foster mother. And in Georgia, police are probing the death of a 2-year-old foster kid. In Kansas, the trial continues for the founder of a foster care agency who's trying to adopt a girl who is loved and wanted by a great-grandmother. In Kansas, a judge rules that a man who donated sperm to a lesbian couple is the legal father and therefore must pay child support. In Ohio, two adoptive parents who abandoned a 9-year-old and were charged with a crime for doing so now want him back since he's finally gotten some much-needed mental help. And in California, a foster mother who was acquitted of child abuse in 2012 died. In Utah, a group of 12 biological fathers filed a federal lawsuit against the state alleging that Utah laws permit legalized fraud and kidnapping. In Washington, the child protective industry is being sued for placing a boy who was molested with a convicted sex offender who never should have been licensed as a foster parent. In Massachusetts, an 11-year-old autistic boy was sexually assaulted at his father's home by another kid, and the child protective industry is passing it off as consensual sex. In Georgia, police are searching for a missing foster child. And finally tonight, in Maine, a mother gives birth all by herself in the driveway in the freezing cold while the father was grabbing her bag and getting ready to take her to the hospital. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.